starts. Hi everyone, and welcome to this live Q&A with the Godot Engine developers. So we are going to try to keep it to 1 hour long this time so that it doesn't drag on for too long. And like always, you can ask questions in the chat. Make sure to prefix your question with the !question word so that we can easily filter them in the very lively chat so that we know like this is a question and we can copy them to then ask them later. So send us your questions and we'll do our best to answer the ones which are best suited for live chat. If you've been in a previous chat, you might know most of the people already there. So I'll just, you can see the names. There's Gilles, Joan, Juan, Camille, Fabio, Hugo, and myself, Remy. And just a few words of introduction. So if you've not followed the Godot news super closely, we've released Godot 3.3 last week. So which is a pretty big release in the end as a big update to the 3.2 branch. And so far, so good. Like there's pretty good feedback from the community. No huge release showstopper or like game-breaking bugs. There's a few regressions, of course, like always, but nothing really critical. And we will have patch releases in the 3.3 branch released frequently to address those. And of course, the focus stays on Godot 4, which is going slowly but surely. I mean, not so slow actually, but there's just so much work that it takes time. Yeah, I don't know, Juan, maybe if you want to say a few words about like what's been cooking in the master branch lately.
Hi everyone. So let me give you a bit of overview on Godot 4. So everything is like mostly there. All the rendering stuff is like mostly there, just working on very tiny details remaining, hoping to have like in maybe a month an alpha release or something you can use to start testing with all the new features. So you can, it will be pretty broken, but you will be able to start testing everything and give feedback on whatever is broken, which will be super useful for us to polish and fix bugs. Other than that, the final tasks that are being worked on are related to particles. The new particle system is really nice, has a lot of very pretty features. You can do like particle trails. The particle shaders are way more flexible. You can do really complex things with particles right now. Also, Joan here has been working on occlusion culling and occlusion algorithms to improve like rendering on that area. Bastian is not around, but he's been working on the mobile rendering, so we can have like Vulkan on mobile working as fast as possible, and he's working with IHVs in making sure it's as fast as possible. Then you have many of the contributors here, like Gilles has been working on the tile editor. If you follow his Twitter, he posts updates very frequently, so make sure to give him a follow if you're not following him. You have Camille here, who has been working on the new GodotPhysics, fixing lots of issues and improving performance and improving features. Now it's getting to be really nice. Fabio has been working on networking here, and Hugo has been working on website and many other areas and documentation. So if you guys want to ask them anything about what has been cooking, this is a great time. So, okay, that's up to you to take over, Remy.
Yes, then I guess we can, so send us your questions again for those who just joined. Write your questions with the !question prefix so that we can filter them easily. And I guess we can dive in and then we'll probably find questions which enable us to talk about some more of the things which have been cooking in Godot lately. So one first question from Patreon is probably for Juan. What's the state or current plan for the GLES 3 renderer in 4.0, especially with the perspective of what kind of features it will lack compared to like the more high-end Vulkan renderer? So what can users expect like compared to Godot 3, maybe in Godot 4 for mobile GLES?
So the GLES3 render in Godot 4, I'm not sure yet. Well, we are not sure yet if it's going to be for 4.0 or 4.1. The idea is to make it for 4.0. But we need to be like in a state where everything is more or less stable to implement it, because the graphics API may still change a bit during all the beta and everything. So it's like high priority, but we hope that everything else with Vulkan is stable before implementing GLES3, so we don't have to like keep up to date everything. But the idea is to make something more similar. I mean, it's going to be a hybrid between what in Godot 3 is the GLES2 and GLES3 renderer. You probably know that GLES2 is generally faster for the simpler scenes. If you're not using Godot illumination or anything complicated, generally the GLES2 renderer is faster, especially on very old hardware because of the way it's designed. It considers like it's probably a bit technical, but if you have some investigation how GPUs work, like there was a switch between the code like VLIW to the super scalar architectures. So the problem is that with this change and techniques used for latency hiding, the problem is that all hardware, when you write like new code, is really old and it's very slow. This is why when you run like the GLES3 rendering Godot 3 in very old hardware, it performs really bad. So the idea is to make it more like the GLES2 renderer, which is more designed for the old hardware. And GLES3 is going to be like lower end than it is in Godot 3. The idea is that this can run on every phone and run really fast, so you won't have any performance problems using it. Of course, you won't have all the nice and pretty stuff like all the global illumination techniques, and the only way to get global illumination in the GLES3 render is going to be with light maps. That's going to work, but you won't have the new volumetrics or SDFGI or the new GI Pro. That's not going to work. It's going to be more of a low-end renderer, so you can have something really pretty, but in low-end computers. So the idea is going to be like GLES2, but with more features in Godot 3, more or less. That's the idea.
Thanks. So another question from the Patreons is, can you give some advice on how to get into Godot development? It's a big code base, so where to start? So I can probably answer that. I will share a link in the chat, which is, it's an old video from Juan that gives some overview about the code base of Godot, like what is where, because it's fairly well organized. So even if you're coming to Godot as a new contributor and you don't know the code base yet, it's once you know a bit what's the structure, how we organize code, you should be able to find what you search for relatively easily. And knowing that, my advice is to basically pick a bug that sounds simple enough, like maybe something that affects a specific node, and then you can open the file where that node is coded, and you can usually figure out how to fix the bug in that node specifically. So you don't have to learn millions of lines of code of the Godot code base, but you can get familiar with one specific area, and then of course it ties into other things that you might want to read little by little, but you can usually start by scratching an itch on a specific feature, which can be a node, which can be a part of the editor. And of course, you can always join the Godot contributors chat and ask in the Devel channel for guidance on where to find what you're looking for in the code base. But yeah, it's fairly easy to actually get an understanding of what goes on in the Godot code, and then to even without being like a very experienced engine programmer. Like most of us who contribute to Godot did not start as engine programmers. We just started by working on what we want, and then eventually we garner some knowledge that makes us engine programmers in the end. But it's fairly easy to start. So let's pick some questions from the chat. So will there be GDScript just in time or ahead of time compiler or automatic optimization ready for Godot 4 stable? So I think not. George couldn't be there today, but I think GDScript now, as it is in the master branch, is already almost feature complete for what we want to have for Godot 4. Like we really want to have Godot 4.0 released soon, and then keep iterating on that much faster and have like fast 4.1, 4.2 releases, so that we can keep adding new features, but without like delaying everything which has been implemented already. So Godot 4 will probably have the GDScript that we have now, which is already much improved, much already a lot. It got a lot of optimization. It got much cleaner implementation. But we are going to experiment with ideas around just-in-time and ahead-of-time compilation later on. So it's not a priority. The priority is to make it work and work fast, and then we can, in the future, experiment with making it work super fast. But there's still a lot to look forward to in Godot 4. Like yesterday, we merged Lambda support. So there's going to be exciting things. And a related question that I saw in the chat is whether C# scripts will have compatibility breakage in Godot 4. So I can say not more than the rest of the API. Like the C# code will stay the same. It's the same language, and you will still like extend the Godot nodes in the same way. So that's probably not going to change. The only breakage that you will have is the same that affects GDScript and GNative and everything else, which is the changes in the Godot API. So like the classes and the methods and properties of these classes, which might be changed or renamed or removed. So there might be changes to make in your code and in your scenes to adapt it to Godot 4. But there's no planned compatibility change in C# itself that I know of. Question for Camille. It's what's the plan for, or is there a plan around integrating PhysX as a PhysX backend, as a module or as a plugin, and at what time?
So the short answer is yes, there's a plan to have it as a plugin, possibly in Godot 4.1 or later. The plan for Godot 4 is to use GodotPhysics as the default engine, and then Bullet is going to be moved to a plugin. So PhysX has started to be evaluated by several contributors, and yeah, so when we're sure that it can work properly, it will be integrated as a separate plugin.
And the question for Fabio, which is there still progress on WebRTC being made? And the last report I can find on it was from 2019. It seems to be a nice option for multiplayer with HTML5 and other platforms.
Yes, so the WebRTC plugin has seen better time. It's true. Still, I will update it for 3.3. It might work the version for the previous Godot version, but there was some changes in GDNative, so it might need rebuild. I've also spent some time last summer trying to, or quite some time, trying to port everything out of the WebRTC library from Google, because that cannot be integrated in the engine because it's gigabytes and gigabytes of stuff. And I was trying some other libraries so that we could make it a module in Godot. I didn't have much luck at the time, but there is still interest, and it's not abandoned. Like the idea is to keep WebRTC for sure. And the plugin in 3.2 is working. I know some user reported some issues specifically, but I also know that some projects are using it and it's working. So it's a matter of porting or rebuilding it for 3.3. And hopefully whenever a library that is powerful enough like that is like powerful enough and at the same time not too bloated like the Google one, can be integrated. It can become like a real like first-class citizen in the networking. But yeah, if your worry is that it's abandoned, it's not. It's just needs some more love. That's mostly it. Well, yeah, and there was some proposal to also integrate the the streaming part for audio and video, but there is currently no work there because it's a bit of a complex topic. There's a matter of codecs and so on. So it's definitely not something that will be added for 4.0, maybe in the future. But yeah, the plugin itself will stay alive for there will be soon an update for 3.3 and it will be there in 4.0, so not abandoned.
Thanks. A question for Juan about RenderingDevice, which is whether RenderingDevice could be used as a portable graphics library that could be used by other game engines or 3D software.
I don't think so. Everything in Godot is designed to be used by Godot. This makes usability better. So if when you want to make something that is usable by others, it's just way more complex because you have to consider a lot more use cases that everybody may be needing. But in this case, it's made so it's used by Godot itself. So it's very designed for Godot, and the API, the way you use it and everything is just very designed for Godot. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I think there are better libraries if you want for that kind of implementation, but I can't really think of any right now, the name at least. So I know if you look, there's probably others that you can use for this kind of thing that are more generic, more so you can use with other purposes other than Godot.
So there's a question which is whether the first Godot 4 alpha will be published with C# support, so like keeping C# support like we have in 3.x. So I can say that normally yes, like there's no plans not to do it, but depending on, like I still need to update all our build containers and all the environment we use to build Godot 3.x. I haven't yet tried to build Godot 4 for all platforms with that. So I might indeed run into some issues for specific platforms or for C#, I don't know yet. But normally there should be C# support in the first alpha. If not, then in the second. Or later on, do a rebuild of the same later on. But yeah, I don't have any specific concerns around this. And of course, it stays being supported in the same way that it has been until now. So that's, I don't know if it's best for Joan or for Juan. It's a question about GridMap, which is how optimized is GridMap actually? Like, because this user is saying they're using it, but it seems every single mesh gets rendered as like by itself.
I haven't touched GridMap in ages, so I have no idea. Maybe John is more familiar with it. As far as I understand, it uses instancing, so it doesn't really do one roll per mesh, but
yeah,
maybe John is more...
as far as I know, it uses instancing, so it should be fine, but I haven't checked it in 3.3 lately, so could be, I don't know. Maybe if you use some kind of light mapping or baking, then it has to split it into separate meshes because there's no way to use instancing in this case, but I'm not sure right now.
A question for Camille. What part of GodotPhysics are you working on now, or are you going to work on next?
So I've been doing some fixes to stabilize it, and not just me, but multiple contributors have been fixing lots of bugs. So the version 3.3 already has a bunch of fixes, and there will be more in the 3.4 version, in the upcoming version. So apart from that, I've been implementing all the features that are needed to match bullets, so we can make GodotPhysics the default again. And that's cylinder shape support, which is part of the 3.3 release as an experimental feature. So it still has a few glitches in some cases, but it works well, at least for areas and for dynamic objects. Then height maps have been also implemented, and they will be part of the 3.4 release. And also soft bodies, but because they need some changes that are kind of breaking compatibility, I'm not sure at the moment if it's going to be backported to the 3.4 version. So it might be only for Godot 4.0. And now that GodotPhysics is feature complete on this aspect, I've been working on optimizations recently. So it's still in progress, but GodotPhysics will be using threads to parallelize collision computation and lots of things. So yeah, it should be like more than 2 times faster in the coming weeks, and this will be probably backported to version 3.4 as well. And then when so after this optimization pass, I'm going to spend more time on fixing bugs and make some API changes that are needed for Godot 4 that break compatibility, but will provide some new features and fixes that are needed. So yeah, that's the plan.
Nice. A question for Gilles. Can you describe, so for the TileSet editor, can you describe what the process is or will be for making animated tiles?
Well, I cannot describe it right now because I don't know how it's going to work. The thing is, like, I don't make it a priority, at least for 4.0, because what I want to have is support for scene-based tiles. So you can paint scenes on your tile map. I have some ideas to how to improve that, but it's not yet set in stone, so I can't tell for now. So in 4.2 at least, you'll probably have to use a simple scene instead of a normal tile, let's say. So it can be maybe a little bit tedious because you have to have all of your animated tiles inside the separated scenes, but at least that's I think it's unacceptable for workaround for now. We discussed a little bit, I think, the issue on Twitter. Juan, you had maybe an idea about how to work around that. You, as another idea, you could also swap using, what is it called, the animated texture resource. Also, it kind of requires you to make a different version of the whole tile atlas for your animated tile, so it can be tedious and like you got a lot of duplicated data, but at least it would work too. But Juan, you maybe had an idea about how to improve that.
Yeah, I think we were discussing a way to make it relatively easy to implement it in the tile map, but it requires some changes to the rendering that I have been thinking about. So I had not done the to-do list. So when I get more idea and time to work on it, I will just let you know so you can implement it based on the new API for that, I guess.
Okay, sure.
So I have another question. that I got a bit ahead of the call on Twitter, which is how production rate, like 4.0 is obviously not production ready now, but can one already author like GDScript projects that will be compatible with 4.0? So I would say at this stage, until we have like a beta, it's probably a bit risky because we're still like going to rename some APIs, and GDScript is still changing a lot. Like we have some users that already use the 4.0 branch like in production, as in to develop their more ambitious projects that need 4.0 features. But then if you do that, you really need to want to be an early tester that runs into bugs and reports them and helps debug them. So I've seen like contributor reporting lots of issues with GDScript where stuff starting breaking, like some fixes create new bugs, and then your whole project doesn't work anymore. So you have to stay on an old version. So until we start making actual alpha builds, I would stay cautious around this. But at the same time, yes, if it's like a snippet of code or stuff like that, there's chances that it might still work in Godot 4 with minimal adjustments. I mean, sometimes I'm opening projects made against Godot 3 in Godot 4 and then just editing 2 lines and running them to see if the Godot 3 bug is still valid in Godot 4. So it's like, it's not that big of a difference either. So it depends on how much you want to experiment or help us find bugs, and how much you want to be productive with your code. Juan, to what extent will the SDF representation of the world be exposed to normal shaders?
Probably not much of a chance for Godot 4.0. Also, it's not really, how could I explain? It's not really an exact representation in SDF. It's more like an avoxelization of the world that is used for lighting. So it may not be super useful for whatever you're trying to do. Eventually, the idea to get access to it is there. It shouldn't be too complicated, but I think this is definitely like past 4.0 material. I mean, giving more low-level access to the rendering APIs is something that probably will happen. I mean, everything is there, so you can do it, but we need to understand better what users need. So that's probably going to happen after 4.0 is released.
And another rendering question is whether the 2D renderer is going to get more performance improvements. So it's a bit broad question. I can already say, like, for Godot 3.3, there's already been a lot of performance improvements with the addition of batching for 2D, which can like more than double or triple the frame rate on some projects. And I think there's still plans to increase the scope of what can be batched. So for the first implementation, it has been made like relatively conservative to handle like the safe cases, and then there's ways to try to batch more primitives to try to get more performance. But the performance in 3.x should already be pretty good on 2D projects. So if you have performance issues, then it's good maybe to make a bug report to see like that it can be debugged further, and we can see if there are specific bottlenecks, if you can share the project. I think what the challenge might be is like to make sure that 4.0 will have the same kind of optimizations and keep the same like improved performance of 3.3 in the new design. I don't know, Juan, if you have specific considerations for that.
Yeah, the 2D rendering Godot 4 is a bit different than the one in Godot 3. So by default, way faster. Just the fact that it uses Vulkan makes it a lot faster. So you don't, for now, it's not using batching, but Vulkan has like literally no cost when switching like arrays and things. So it's super fast anyway. Probably at some point, some minimal kind of batching, but different than the way it's implemented in Godot 3 will be implemented. But by now, the baseline in Godot 4 is that it's really, really fast. If you want to, for example, use the the draw functions from a node, like draw circle, draw rectangle, draw polygon. That's super fast in Godot 4, like way faster than in Godot 3, thanks to how Vulkan works. So in general, I think I would say that already is really, really fast and probably will get faster, I think. But for example, one interesting thing about Godot 4 is that if you're using lighting, like lights and shadows, this is already like orders of magnitude faster than in Godot 3 because it's all done in a single pass. While in Godot 3 it needs to be done like for each light you need a separate pass. But in Godot 4 it's all single pass, so you can have like maybe, I don't know, 20 lights and it's going to be really fast and you won't notice any performance impact or anything like that. So I think it's really good right now, but can get better also.
Thanks. So now I want to plug my own question because I haven't seen it, but I might have missed it in the chat. But Joan, what is occlusion culling?
Yeah. So yeah, this past month or so, I've been working on the occlusion culling implementation for Godot 4. It's finally merged, so you can try it out right now if you want. There's still a couple of features missing, like creating occluders at import time, and I think we can add some more usability to the way we bake the occluders in the editor, but the core functionality is there. And yeah, the big requested feature in 3D for Godot for many years is occlusion culling, which means it's a system that tries to detect when an object is behind another one and completely skip it when rendering. So if you have a big scene with, for example, a big city, and you have a building in front of you, you just want to render the building, you don't want to render the rest of the city. So the way it will work in Godot 4 is you can define occluder meshes. So you can define a simple geometry that represents your buildings in the city, for example, and they will get rendered in CPU, and the rest of the objects will test if they are in front of or behind these occluders, and if they are behind, then they will. It's like they don't exist. So the CPU will skip a lot of work that it would be otherwise doing. And yeah, I think that's basically it. I don't know if Juan wants to add anything to that, but it's finally here. It's not a silver bullet, just as a disclaimer. It's not something that you click a button and it makes your game faster, but for some cases, I think it will be a great improvement. If you have lots of objects and big objects that can occlude many smaller objects that are behind it.
And for the 3.x branch, I think Longeli, one of the contributors who implemented the 2D batching, is now working on a different implementation with rooms and portals that might be easier to fit into the Godot 3 design and still let you like do your own occlusion curling. So we'll see if we can get that in Godot 3.4 or the next.
Yeah, the way portals and rooms work is you can define your rooms in the scene and portals, which would be typically doors or entryways, and then you can test if from one room you can see another one, and if you are in one room, you can skip all the rooms that are not visible from that room. So it's not the same as in Godot 4.0, but it can also give a good improvement in performance.
And the follow-up question on that is, why did you choose to use Embry, the Embry library for culling, so which is a CPU-based raycasting library instead of doing GPU culling?
Yeah, the idea behind that is if you use GPU culling, you have to gather all your occluders, send them to the GPU, wait for it to render, gather the rendered data to the CPU again, and then to the testing. So sending data between CPU and GPU can take some time and can create stalling. So one is waiting for the other to finish, and so the synchronization takes time. So the idea is if we do everything on CPU, we don't need to handle all that communication, and things can go faster, hopefully. And since we are doing a very low resolution rendering of the depth buffer, it's fast enough in CPU, so we don't need to worry about GPU.
Question maybe for Gilles. I volunteer you just because you fixed a bug in it recently, so maybe you know. Will Godot 4 be able to bake navigation meshes in runtime?
I think it already can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm not sure about it because I think I solved on the navigation server. It's not about that, but I'm pretty sure the navigation server exposes a function to do that. So yeah, basically you can.
Yeah, I think
as a disclaimer, it's not something quite efficient. So basically, you could want to do that in the background. But aside from that, it should work out of the box.
So yeah, that's part of the new navigation server that has been implemented for Godot 4. And there's a contributor who is working on doing a backport of the feature for the 3.x branch. So we still have to figure out exactly how this backport should be done, like in terms of, because the new navigation server breaks a bit the API, like we made things better. So that means also removing what was not good from the old system. But now for the 3.x branch, we have to decide if we are fine with breaking compatibility, which means that people would have to change their navigation setup significantly when changing their projects, or if it should be backported in a way that does not break compatibility. So we'll probably consult with the community around this to see like what existing users of navigation features want. If they really want the new design at the cost of compatibility breakage, then that might be an option. So there's a few questions about the asset library and potential asset store. So for the asset store, I can not say much, but I can say that it's something we're considering. We're looking into option to potentially like have an official marketplace where people can exchange assets and sell them too. So unlike the current one, which is only for free and open source assets. So once we have information around that, we'll be sure to communicate it on the blog, because that's something where we will want to involve the community. But yeah, so far there's nothing really interesting to announce here, just the fact that we're looking into it. As for the asset library that we already have, so there's a redesign of it that Hugo has been working on, and which we do plan to deploy. So Hugo, I don't know if you want to say a few words on that.
So yes, I've been continuing work on the new asset library, which is mostly feature complete. But since we have other projects that I am working on right now, and this project tend to be of higher priority, I can't give an ETA on deploying the new asset library. But I will keep you up to date on Twitter and everything if there are new features that I add to the asset library.
So there's a question from earlier, which was, what are the news for XR in Godot 4? So Bastian is not here because it's middle of the night for him, but he's been working recently on, first he worked on an OpenXR plugin for Godot 3, which you can use already. And now he's working on rendering for Godot 4, implementing a mobile renderer, so he's been fixing some issues on Android and now implementing a renderer that works well, or better on Android. It doesn't work well now, but it works. And once that's in, then you will probably start looking a bit more closely at OpenXR for Godot 4 on desktop and mobile. So there's nothing that can be tested yet for XR in Godot 4, but it's still it's being worked on. Like there's some backend changes to make things better, and all this rendering work, which is preliminary to be able to render things in VR. So question was whether there will be an official list of supported plugins, like officially supported plugins, now in the future. So yes, I mean, we still need to figure out, like with the new asset library, maybe then improve the discoverability, but our vision is to make sure that Godot can be used to create plugins very easily, and that many features that might be considered like important for many users could be official first-party plugins, which can be either developed by existing core contributors or maybe more realistically, which could be like community developed, like plugins developed by a single community member, and then that can be promoted as an official plugin, and this can be like officially maintained by that person on behalf of the project. We'll figure that out along the way, but we already have that for some things, like for example, the Android Google billing plugin is an official plugin which is maintained by a contributor, and we recently moved all the iOS plugins out of the core engine and into an actual like Godot iOS plugins repository, which is also maintained by a contributor. So that's kind of like first-party plugins that we plan to support and to make sure that they work with all Godot versions. But maybe more than that in the future, we will probably want to, on the asset library, mark some featured plugins like that are not officially maintained by core contributors, but that are like recommended as good additions to your Godot workflow. But that's something that will evolve organically as together with the community. I think we'll see what people want and what we can offer. Gilles, how viable is it to port a 3.x game that makes heavy use of tilesets and TileMaps to Godot 4? How much manual work or rework will be needed?
I'd say for if you use atlases mainly, then it's almost known. It should be compatible out of the box, more or less. I mean, there's use cases I cannot, I can hardly think about first. So yeah, you may lose your auto tiles. So this is something you'll probably have to port you manually. It shouldn't be something very difficult though with the new editor, because it's probably going to be a lot more efficient to do things in the new editor, the planned new editor. But the only thing missing would be the support, the backward compatibility for single tiles. So if you use that a lot, you might have to do them again by hand. It's a little bit annoying, but I have ideas to solve the problem, but I'm not sure I will be able to implement that for 4.0. So it might come for 4.1. I'm not sure. But yeah, aside from that, if you use atlases, it should be compatible right away.
Has it ever been considered to add asset library support to the product manager so that plugins can be automatically recommended for a new project? So there's already asset library support in the product manager. There's a tab which is called templates, I think, which enables to install templates and plugins and demos and full projects. But I think, yeah, the question is more about whether there would be some system to automatically recommend plugins. And that's something we want to work on in the future. Probably once we have the new asset library, to have a system for contextual recommendations, where if you search for a feature or if you use the editor in a specific way or whatever, have ways to make this information a bit more evident, like you might have in, I don't know, in Visual Studio Code or something. If you start editing C++ code, then it will say, hey, you're editing C++, do you want to install a C++ debugger and whatever, linter or different kind of related tools, and you can say yes or no. So we'll probably try to have a system like that in the future once we have the new asset library and once we actually have identified things which might be useful to recommend. Like, for example, hey, do you use Git? Do you want the Git integration plugin and so on? So it's all things, I think we even said it at the last Q&A, but it's the direction we want to go to. And we just let the ecosystem mature at the same way as the engine. And then once things are ripe, we are going to improve the integration.
So yes, my opinion about this is that we need to make asset installation as straightforward as possible. So it should require as few clicks as possible. So my idea was to implement favorite assets, which could be done locally by storing the ID of each asset in a list of favorites, and you could then browse through favorite tabs in the project manager and in the editor. And I also made a pull request that makes the asset installation process more straightforward. So instead of having to click an install button, it will install the asset automatically. And that already makes things a bit less confusing, I think. But I think that implementing favorites is something I will look into in the future.
A question for Fabio. There was some talk a while back about even higher level networking options that would handle node replication and such. Has there been any more thoughts on this?
Okay, well, there haven't been much work on it, much more work on it. I know, well, there was a very interesting PR from Andrea Catania Odino, and he did some very good work. I'm still waiting for him to kind of make it ready for review. It was interesting. It didn't do node replication, but it managed some various form of synchronization and the reconciliation, a client-side reconciliation, which was promising. So the idea is to at least look into that. Not sure if it's gonna stay as a module like it's proposed right now or become GD native plugin. Of course, if that's what we decide to do, we will need to make sure that all the the GD native interface is good and ready for it. So all the features that are needed are there. But there hasn't been no more work on the replication itself for the nodes, because that's very complicated topics, and we've done some more discussion internally. We couldn't really find a very a good way to do it that could be generic for many use cases and many games. It seems to be something really specific. There will be probably some more thoughts on it, but not for 4.0. So for 4.0, the only thing that could get in as a module is the work done by Andrea Catania, which has been advertised as very good by some people that have been using it. So it looks very promising, and we are interested in looking into it if it really helps people. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
So question for Juan, maybe, is there a new demo plan for Godot 4.0 to show off its capabilities?
So there's plans for doing two things. The first is the existing TPS demo, which is everybody complaining Godot 3 that it requires too many resources and it's too expensive to run. So you need a very high-end machine to run it. So to prove that Godot 4 is going to be awesome, what we're going to do is that's going to be like a mobile demo now. It's going to, the aim is to get it to run even on phones. The old TPS demo as a Godot 4 project. For that, it's going to use all the new stuff like the new light maps and the new LOD and all the new occlusion cooling and everything. So it's going to be pretty cool. I'm going to work on that next month. But also there's another demo that we have been working on, which is really complex. It's much bigger than the old TPS demo. That I also be working next month on getting everything together with the artist who has been working on it. So there's like characters and enemies and there's like a very gigantic town with a castle that you can explore inside, and it's super nice. And it's going to be making use of all the new features. So I'm also going to work on this next month, and I will get help from other contributors because it's a lot of work and I have too many things to do. But hopefully by the time we release alpha or maybe a bit later, we're going to have the new demo so you can test. Yeah, that's the plan.
A question for Gilles. Are there plans to update the collision tool for tilesets? So I guess like how you define collisions so that you don't have to click every tile. I guess that's already part of the new design.
Yes, it's not yet implemented. It's the next step. But yeah, basically the idea is that like any kind of properties you're going to edit on tiles, you'll be able to kind of a palette of different values. So for example, if you're editing collision shape, you're going to have a palette of different shapes you used in your tile set. And then you pick a shape and then you paint on your atlas or your set of tiles, and that's basically it. So you could do the same, for example, for probabilities or let's say the index. You like type 10 and then you draw on the tile atlas, and it writes and it sets the tiles properties the index properties as 10 as a value. So it's going to be that's why I was saying that the terrains like setting the terrains and the compatibility breakage on auto tiles won't be that much of a problem because it's going to be such a breeze to edit tiles, a lot of tiles at once. So yeah, this will be improved, and that's one of the most important things I want to rework on the new TileSet and TileMap editors.
Question for Hugo, maybe. Are there any plans on editor UI overhaul for Godot 4?
So indeed, there will be an editor UI overhaul for Godot 4. I've been working on a new editor team which better follows the modern design principles with rounded corners, fewer borders and stuff. I will post a link to the PR in the chat soon. And we will try to merge it maybe next month, in time for the Godot 4 Alpha. And so that you will be able to give feedback about the new team, which looks more modern. And I've been working a lot on this since 2019, so it's good to finally be able to merge it in master.
And yeah, to clarify, it improved a lot the visual aspects, but it's not a change of like the way the editor itself, like the UI of the editor is organized. So it's not changing the way you use Godot, just the way it looks. And for that, we haven't concrete plans yet to like make a huge like redesign of the Godot UX and UI experience, because I think most users are kind of fine with the way it works now. But the main change will probably come from the new multiple window support that we have now. That for 4.0, we're not doing too much with that, but for future releases, we can maybe start experimenting a bit more with rethinking a bit the real estate of the editor and how the different components can interact with each other and be maybe placed differently. So we're getting close to the end. So if you had like a real burning question that you really want to ask, then it's the last chance. I'm still going through the list of all the ones that we missed. So there's quite a few questions, of course, on expected ETA for Godot 4. So that's always the question where we cannot give you a clear answer, but we're working towards the first alpha, which is not like final. So which would be very buggy, but which will be a way to enable more people to test what is already there. And then little by little, we will have more alphas to add the new stuff which is still missing. So like the first alpha will not be fully feature complete. We will keep adding new stuff which is still being worked on, while also focusing mostly on fixing bugs. So like the main interest for us of an alpha is that people can make bug reports, and then we can fix them and then confirm, okay, yeah, there was this bug in alpha 1 and in alpha 2 it has been fixed, so that's good. So that's a way for us to see progress, that each alpha gets less buggy, and then eventually when it's not too buggy, we can go to a beta build once we are mostly done with the features and then focus 100% on fixing bugs. So yeah, alpha coming soon, trademark, and beta then a few months later, but it's hard to say when exactly. It will really depend on how much work, how many bugs we still have to fix, and how much help we get from the broader community to fix the bugs and make sure that everything is ready quickly. So I guess that's mostly it. I don't know, guys, if you have some other topic you would like to talk about that has not been discussed yet. Some upcoming exciting work that the community should be hyped about, even more hyped than occlusion culling.
I don't think there's anything more hyped than occlusion culling, which is good because it's a great feature. I mean, it deserves it.
We should make a Godot 4 version only with occlusion culling. People would still be happy. Or maybe not, I don't know.
Well, a fun question to end. Very short maybe, but for every one of us, what's your favorite new feature or game-changing feature that is coming in Godot 4 that you are really hyped about? So let's start with Gilles. TileMap editor.
Yeah, well, that's kind of, we're not users, so basically that's probably it. That's probably the TileMap editor, because it's something I've been working on for a long time, and it's likely the same for all of us here. Like we're spending so much time working on things, and when the 4.0 releases, our highest hope is like everybody's going to like what we've been working on for months. But aside from that, yeah, it's a TileMap editor because before I started to contribute to Godot, I wanted to make a small 2D game, and like started to try Godot with the its tilemap editor to make some tiles and all, and it was kind of a pain. So I'm quite happy I was able to rework that and make it make the experience a little bit smoother. So yeah.
What about you, John?
Yes, I would say all the 3D rendering features, not only occlusion cooling, which is the obvious one, but I think it's getting to a point that where 3D rendering is getting really mature now. So that's really nice. But yeah, that would be mine.
Juan?
I think there's absolutely too many things that are amazing in Godot 4 that I believe that contributors did an incredible job with it. It's going to be a completely different engine pretty much than Godot 3. But my favorite actually is not so much the new shiny stuff, but all the changes that were made to the core engine. The core engine in Godot has seen a huge amount of cleanup everywhere and rewriting a lot of stuff. It's much faster, much cleaner, much easier to maintain, like much safer to run on multiple threads. Like they're having so many improvements on the core that are going to be invisible for you, except that things will going to just work. That to me, that has been the coolest part. And of course, everything else is great too, but I think that's my favorite.
Camille?
So I'm very excited to work on buoyancy for RIA so that we can have like floating objects on water and stuff like that. But that will be probably for 4.1 because of course the highest priority is on making things more stable and optimized for now.
Fabio?
So to add something, I think, well, first of all, I think we are a bit under-evaluating the 3.3 release, because I think it's a great release. We added a lot of features and a lot of improvements. I've worked on the HTML5 web platform, which is like really changed face completely from 3.2 and 3.1, 3.2 and 3.3 now. But in general, on 4.0, I think that I will be trying to, now that the HTML5 platform is in a much better shape, to work on some more networking improvements. I've already started reviewing and adding some features for easier NAT punch through and those kind of things. And hopefully the WebRTC plugin that was mentioned before will see better times. And we've been also planning some optimization on the server side, like when you try to run Godot as a server, the server or headless export, there's still I still have to start actual work on that, but we have some plans to make it faster and more performant. So I think that will help people that try to make multiplayer games a lot.
Hugo?
So I think one of the most exciting features in Godot 4 is not really a single feature, but it's more that everything will be more polished and it will feel more professional. And we will also have support for many things that we did not have before and that were quite important, such as full support for right-to-left typesetting and complex scripts. So you will be able to use the editor or play games written in Arabic or Hebrew, which is very important for mobile and even on desktop, because there are a lot of people speaking those languages. And on top of that, if you like fonts, you will also be able to use variable fonts to save some space on disk and also have more more freedom for your design. And lastly, we also have a pull request that may be merged to include MSDF-based fonts, which lets you resize the font as much as you want without any runtime performance cost. So you can even have retime effect to resize text without the performance penalty that you would get with dynamic fonts. So that's also pretty exciting, I think, even if it's less visually impressive than new global illumination, but having good text rendering is really important in a game engine, I think.
Nice. So you stole all the good ideas that I wanted to mention. So now I'm stuck with saying that I'm really excited that, as Juan said, the core has been really improved, and we've also improved a lot, the quality of the code base overall, both in terms of what kind of C++ features we use, what kind of guidelines we have, the style, and the continuous integration. We have unit tests for the core of the engine. So we're really making things a lot more stable and a lot more future-proof, so that we can accept more contributions and have a clear way to know how you should write your code to fit the Godot design. So we're also going away from some of the Godot specific things that we had, or we're keeping them as wrappers around more standard stuff. So Godot is becoming a bit less foreign for people who want to contribute to it. It's still it's still those things in its own way. It has its own wrappers around some APIs that you have to use so that things are consistent, but it's a lot less surprising for contributors. So I think that's going to make working on Godot 4.x much more fun, and I can already see it myself when backporting things from Godot 4 to Godot 3. That's having to solve merge conflicts due to all the improvements we've made to the core API and the styling and stuff shows that already 3.x is starting to look really old, and we're looking forward to the next branch. So I think that's it for this live Q&A. Thanks everyone for attending. It's been a pleasure, and we'll keep you informed about the next Q&A. So we missed, usually we do one per month, and we missed the one in March, but I think we'll probably have one at the end of May. Hopefully, maybe with an alpha ready to publish. Let's see. So yeah, thanks everyone, and bye-bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye bye everyone. Thank you.
Bye.